Hey, welcome back, IB International Economics students, to this video lecture. Today, we are illustrating the effects of protectionist quotas, okay? The effects protectionist quotas have on markets. Okay, so last time we have talked about the effects of protectionist tariffs on the market, and now let's talk about the effects of protectionist quotas on the importing markets of any country. Now, let's look at the Canadian apple market. Why the Canadian apple market? Because in last videos, we have outlined that Canada has a comparative disadvantage at the production of apples. Therefore, they input apples instead of growing apples by themselves. So we have come up with this graph, okay? This is the graph of the Canadian apple market without anything added to it. So we have the domestic producers, the domestic consumers, the domestic supply, the domestic demand. We have the international or the global, okay, the world supply, which is SW right here. And we have illustrated that the government or the consumers in Canada imports more apples than they produce because they have an absolute disadvantage of the production and consumption of apples. And that is why the government, in order to protect the domestic apple farmers in Canada, they could either enact tariffs, which is import tax on apples, or they can enact quotas, which sets a limit on how much apples may be imported into the country. Okay, so a protectionist quota is anything that sets a physical limit on how many apples or how many pounds of apples or kilograms or tons of apples may be imported into Canada on a certain duration of time. So how do we illustrate this? Okay, let's say this is the Canadian apple market, right? Let's say the government enacts a protectionist quota that the international community may only import this much apples. Okay, this graph, this box right here, this red box right here is the only, okay, between QS and QQ, okay, quantity quota between QS and QQ is how much apples may be imported into Canada. Anything exceeding this may not be imported. Now remember, original imports are between QS and QD, but now the foreign companies may only import QS to QQ. Now what happens to the supply of apples? Now let's look at the line between the world supply and the set quota quantity. So this is the line where set quota quantity starts, and this is the line where the world supply starts. Now let's just shift the entire supply curve right towards the intersection with the quantity of the quota. So that's what happens here. So this is the domestic, this was the original supply. And we shifted to the right to the intersection where the supply reaches the quantity. And that's what gives us the new supply diagram given the quota. Now what happens when price risen, okay, when the price has risen to such a high place because of the protectionist quota, okay, the price increases, right? So the price goes up like this, and the demand decreases, leaving us in the new equilibrium of the red point. Okay, the red point is the new equilibrium given the quota enacted. Now, given the quota enacted, what does consumer surplus look like? Okay, so we link this new equilibrium back to the price, and this triangle right here is the consumer surplus. What is the producer surplus? Now, there's two producer surplus. One is this box right here, and one is this box right here. Okay, so considerably, okay, this part right here, original importing company welfare is this entire box, right? However, with this protectionist quota, the welfare of foreign companies importing into Canada is only now this part. Okay, so that is the stakeholders in the Canadian market given a quota on the imports of apples into the market. So this is actually a lot harder to diagram and to illustrate in graphic form, considering how it has to account for us as stakeholders and considering how it shifts. But all you have to know is that when a quota is enacted, the supply shifts to the intersection where quantity of the quota is enacted. Okay, so that's all you have to know. So when a quota is set, the supply shifts to the location at which the quantity is set, which is this vertical line right here, and that is where your quota is set, and that is actually where your new equilibrium is where and with given the new equilibrium, you're going to be able to talk about the producer surplus, the consumer surplus, and obviously domestic producer surplus increases by a lot because of this protectionist tariff, and seeing as how this protectionist tariff is indeed aimed at protecting the domestic consumers or the domestic producers. However, domestic consumers do suffer, seeing as how the quantity of apples decrease and price of apples do increase because of this protectionist quota. Now, I do hope this video is helpful, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Good.